someone actually asked me, how is it that you and your brother are both entrepreneurs and neither of your parents were in that kind of space?
So how do we get from being underwriters to creating your own company?
Neither of them looked at risk as a barrier.
A company? I mean, that's crazy. That's absurd. That's nonsense.
And found that they all had a lack of a particular enzyme that digests protein.
It's not that kids are eating it, it's parents who are feeding them this.
No.
It's not.
No.
I guess I'm doing a good job with my kids.
Today, we are delighted to welcome a visionary leader and innovator in the biopharmaceutical industry, Dr. Joan Fallon. Dr. Fallon is the founder and CEO of Curemark. Curemark has raised tens of millions of dollars over the years with an investment valuation of over $1 billion. From creating an impactful patient-centered model for autism treatment to holding over 400 patents worldwide, she continues to challenge the status quo. She is also an inspiring advocate for children's health and a champion for women in leadership. Dr. Fallon's insights and experiences shared in her book, Goodbye Status Quo, provide invaluable lessons for all aspiring agents of change. What can we generally as a society implement to foster innovation, encourage women to take ownership of their ideas?
Continuing to feed them the idea that they can do anything they want to do. When you think about it, a woman couldn't have a credit card till 1971. Entrepreneurship is one way of doing it. Risk is something that you manage. It's not something to be feared.
Dr. Fallon, please welcome to the show.
The Avenue of the Strongest is a podcast dedicated to exploring the lives and experiences of the most inspiring individuals from around the world. Each episode features interviews with fascinating guests who share their insights and wisdom on a variety of topics, including education, impact, motivation, health, and learning. Here are your hosts, Anayet Chowdhury and Vlad Suleiman.
Dr. Fallon, it is an absolute pleasure to have you here and get to speak with you today. Please welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
I love the work that you're doing, but more importantly, I want to emphasize that I truly love the work that you're doing in encouraging women in various facets, but in this leadership space. I've seen some of the things that you've shared over the years on social platforms like Twitter, but this is something that holds a special place in my heart, but this is something that is critical. But we'll go ahead and get into that stuff later on in the interview. First, I would love to know a little bit more about your story because, and please, I apologize if I'm mistaken, but I understand your parents were underwriters, right? They used to work in insurance. Is that correct?
That's right. They were
Okay,
both
so
large lines underwriters.
Awesome. So how do we get from being underwriters, being in a family to that, to creating your own company? I'd love to learn more about your earlier stories.
So initially, I never really thought about what the two of them did. My mom was an actuary and then did, large lines underwriting. My dad worked for Lloyd's of London. He did a lot of reinsurance. And it wasn't until someone actually asked me, how is it that you and your brother are both entrepreneurs and neither of your parents were in that kind of space? And I didn't really think about it. And what was clear was that neither of them looked at risk as a barrier. And risk for entrepreneurs especially is the thing that either holds them back or keeps them from becoming an entrepreneur. And so I grew up with just knowing that risk is something that you manage. It's not something to be feared. And I think that gives me a perspective, and my brother as well, a perspective that allowed me to go forward and form a company and pioneer this treatment.
This podcast is sponsored by ArgoPrep, an award-winning edtech company serving over 1 million students nationwide. We understand that as parents, you want to ensure that your child receives the best education possible. Say hello to ArgoPrep. With over 15 plus educational awards earned in just the past year, ArgoPrep's platform offers your child video lessons, quizzes, drills, printable worksheets, and more. Best of all, your ArgoPrep subscription comes included with 4 comprehensive digital workbooks that cover all 4 subjects: math, ELA, science, and social studies. Visit ArgoPrep.com today and start your free trial.
Did you get any pushback early on from your parents saying, hey, Joanne, maybe, a company? I mean, that's crazy. That's absurd. That's nonsense. I'm asking for a specific reason, but Did you get any pushback in those really early years, or not really?
No, I had a successful practice, pediatric practice, and then I made this discovery, and my father had passed by that time, but my mom was like, what can I do to help?
Wow, I
And
love that.
and it got to the point where it really either I had to find out whether what I had discovered would be helpful to these children or not. It wasn't like I could
Okay.
sit by and say, well, I don't know, it's risky. I went all in. My retirement money, everything, all in. And with a ton of support, from her and my brother and everyone else in my life.
At,
Wow.
at what age did you open up the company and decided to go all in?
50.
Wow,
Wow.
that's
I was
incredible.
50 years old.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So
Wow.
I just walked away from what I was doing. And, I had a really good reason to do it, but it still was a very large risk for me to just
Mm.
walk away like that. But it turned out to be something I think bigger than I thought because, autism was not as prevalent as it was when I left as it is today. And it's really a global problem. So we're solving a global problem here.
May I ask why that is? Why is there an increase? And I don't know if the stat is currently up to date, but is it 1 in 59, or is
It's
that?
it's like 1 in 36 now. It
Wow.
goes up again.
Why?
I don't think we know. I just don't think we know. I think that there's more awareness now, so they know that this is something that's autistic or autism is autism, but we don't know why. I think it's a confluence, personally, it's a personal opinion, a confluence of genetic predisposition and sort of the environment and the world we live in.
Okay, let me take it. I'm sorry. Let me take it a step. Let's lay out the fundamentals. What is autism? It sounds like a silly question to ask, but many
No.
individuals may not even know, or they've heard of that obviously, but they don't.
Right.
So let's lay that foundational work down.
So there's, it's a confluence. It's not a confluence, but it's a diagnosis made when there is, a lack of socialization, so a lack of interaction, a lack of communication, and generally some OCD, obsessive compulsive type behaviors.
Hmm.
And it's a
Okay.
spectrum. So not every
Right.
child or every individual looks the same. They're different child to child. The matrix of their symptoms, while they fall into those categories, are very different. So they
Hmm.
used to say when you saw one child with autism, you saw one child with autism. So that's there, and we see more and more of it. And sometimes it's in pockets in different places in the country, in our country. But it's global. It's a global problem.
And we're not
And at what
exactly
age?
sure.
At what age can you diagnose it?
You could definitively diagnose it at about 3. There are
Okay.
some children who lose sort of function and then they become autistic, and there are children who never gain that function. So you know that they're autistic younger, but you don't have a stable diagnosis until about 2.5 or 3 for sure.
I'd love to talk briefly about your work here, in specific to this, which Curemark has developed a drug called CMAT. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's our
And
working name. Yeah.
so I'd love for you to explain first what that drug is. What's the purpose of this drug, and what is it treating?
So the finding was it originated when I started seeing a lot of children in my practice with autism, and what we saw were children who had this myriad of symptoms or manifestations. But what was curious to me was what they ate or what they didn't eat, and that seemed to have more similarity child to child than their symptoms. So
Okay.
there were more children who ate the same than had the same symptoms or the same manifestation of symptoms. And what it was a very, very, very high carbohydrate intake and a very low protein intake.
Okay.
And while that tends to be, how children want to eat, but it's not like this. This is really extreme. And so I used to call it the 10 thing diet. kids eat, cereals and bagels and waffles and
Yeah.
pasta without sauce and all of those things. And it persists. It's not like it goes away when the palate gets more sophisticated like it does in most people. This persisted. And I kept thinking that that could not be by chance, that there had
Right.
to be some reason why that was going on. And while everyone told me it was a sensory issue, the kids have a lot of sensory issues, so they don't like loud noises or seams in their clothing. Not every child has the same sensory manifestation. So to tell me that they all have this food manifestation didn't make sense to me. So I did blood and urine and stool on a small number of kids and found that they all had a lack of a particular enzyme that digests protein. And that's kind of how that started.
Got it.
But isn't it because, I mean, it's not that kids are eating it, it's parents who feeding them this.
No,
It's
no,
No,
maybe,
no,
no?
it's
no,
not.
no.
It's not.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's a self-selected diet of a very extreme. These parents can't get these kids to eat protein. They can force feed them, but they don't digest it. If you don't digest it,
Yeah.
it
Gonna
becomes
have issues.
problematic in their guts, and then they have all kinds of other problems. So
And where are you at with this current? Because it's still undergoing clinical trials. Is that correct?
So we've finished 2 phase 3s, and we're getting ready to submit application to FDA. And we have children who've continued on the medication for over 10 years now. They remain in a trial that we're doing. So we have a lot of data. And what I think is important here is that we have been able to show that it's disease modifying, not just symptom modifying. And for a condition that's neurodevelopmental, that's really important.
Wow. Okay.
And
this-
I know that your clinical observations have some different approach. So could you please elaborate on the process? How is it different from the traditional methods, medical models?
So I think that in the past, drugs have been developed by creating new molecules, patenting them, and then retrofitting them into a disease. So they don't, there's a disconnect between the molecule that they discover or that they put together and the disease that they're treating. For us, or for me, it was a matter of seeing an observation of an individual in a clinic and then developing a treatment or a molecule or a formulation that can actually treat what we saw rather than the other way around. And you can see that most of the big or many of the big pharmas don't have research facilities like they used to. The research facilities are more clinical than they are early R&D, where the molecules are now basically done a lot by biotech, and then they're bought by big pharma.
Hey there, before we dive back into the episode, I wanted to stop for just a brief moment and express our heartfelt gratitude.
Knowing that you've chosen to spend your time with us, to listen and engage with our content truly warms our hearts.
Every story we share, every topic we discuss is made much more meaningful if you are here with us on this journey.
If you found value in what you've heard so far and you're excited as we are about the episodes to come, we'd be so honored if you'd hit that subscribe button. It not only ensures you stay informed of all of our new content, but it also supports us in continuing to create and share. From all of us here, a sincere thank you.
Now, without further ado, let's get back to the episode.
This sounds, because I was watching some of your videos which go years back. So first thing I want to point out, it sounds extremely expensive. And I noticed that Curemark has been built without traditional venture capital funding, which is really incredible. And to that point, I want to make a note that I know you mentioned that Curemark is a socially driven biotech company. I'd love to dive a little bit more to that. What do you mean by Curemark being a socially driven biotech company?
So, the company was not founded to, to make treatments and make money. And, that's not how it was founded. It was founded on finding something that we thought could be helpful to the children.
Right.
So the motivation behind what we did was very much about finding something and seeing it's beneficial for children or the individuals with autism. So it was a kind of a backwards thing, much more like some of the some biotechs were founded by parents who had a child with a particular condition or something like that. This was not that. This was just finding something and then going about doing that. And we're very involved with the autism community. We think that there's lots of needs in the autism community, of which this is just one.
Right.
And so being able to, for example, I love baseball. I'm a big baseball person. We sponsor sensory suites in about 4 parks, baseball parks, that serve the public, and so that families who have children with autism can go see a baseball game. Like at the Cyclones in Brooklyn. So it's important, and we get letters every day from families that say, I've been able to take my other children to a game because our child with autism can't go, and now they can go and see these games. So being supportive of the community, understanding the needs, and filling those needs are as important to us as getting this drug approved and out there.
So if what exactly does CMAT do? Not from a biological perspective, but just in general, how are these improving patient outcomes?
So it's a treatment, not a cure, and it provides a level of amino acid availability to the children that they don't have because they're missing this enzyme. And so if we're looking at sort of the double-blind trial, if they're here in terms of severity, they go here. If they're here, they go here. So it's basically an improvement. But that improvement, depending on where that child sits, can be life-altering. So, for example, we have a child that comes from overseas. They had to come here, establish a residency. The child was very severe, had no communication at all, no eye contact, was a runner. Some of these kids are running. They run like, when your dog is out of the house quickly. They run out of school, of the home. And so he came, he received his 12 weeks of treatment. He came, or placebo, whatever it was, and then he stayed on for the extension trial. And he went back and forth between Europe and here with a lot of improvement. But that improvement was he could say mama and dada. He can, go out to dinner with them. He had eye contact. He listened to a command. Those are huge when you're trying to cross the street and the child runs ahead of you, or things like that, or trying to just go to dinner outside.
Oh, yeah.
Very, very big changes.
That's
and then
incredible.
So the child should take the CMAT all the time, or is just some treatment and then he stops?
No, it's a deficiency. So much like, if you have thyroid deficiency or something like that, it's a lifelong treatment.
Wow.
And may I ask, is it expensive for families
We're not up to
have
that
it?
yet. We're not up
That's
to
not
that
the-
yet. So,
yeah.
right, we'll get up to that. But my focus is every child should get this no matter what. And I
love
think
that.
that
And
we've
it's-
built a program, or, we've built this in such a way that that's possible. So,
It must bring you great satisfaction. This is groundbreaking work that you're doing that takes obviously many, many years. Takes a lot of grit to go ahead and see this through. But I can't wait for the day when it actually comes available to the public. What a feeling that must be, or that is going to be.
Do you think it's a far away from being pushed to the public?
no, I think probably a year or two. It has to go in now to be evaluated, but it will be a year or two, which seems like to some people a long time, but it's in my world, it's not very long.
Yeah.
This world is very slow and turns very, very slowly.
I want to talk briefly about you holding over 400 patents. Obviously, you've shattered many glass ceilings as a female innovator. I'd love to listen to, or I'd love to learn more about what strategy. Oh, so here, let me let me reframe the question. Vlad has two daughters. I have a daughter on the way. This is very important for me as well. What can we, or what strategies can we generally as a society implement to foster innovation, encourage women to take ownership of their ideas, and then I guess the second part of the question is how can we decrease a gender disparity in the patent holding side?
Okay. So those are great questions. I think that continuing to feed them the idea that they can do anything they want to do is key. Because what happens is people, because of convenience sometimes, fall into a gender lens that they don't mean to. And I'm not talking about just men, women do it too. A gender lens of accomplishment or things that people want to do that is just convenient more than prospective. So just reminding them that they can do anything they want to do, I think is really important. And catching yourself if you fall into a gender lens of, well, this is better suited for a woman than this.
Right.
And so that's the first thing. You said it, the other thing that I think is important is taking ownership of your ideas. Women don't take ownership of things quite the same way that men do. Partly, I think, has to do with historical, not owning things. I mean, when you think about it, a woman couldn't have a credit card till 1971. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. Wow.
But that's true. And
That's
so
crazy.
if you're not taking hold of the financial world, then, and it doesn't have as much meaning as it does to men, it's going to hinder us as a gender from being able to do things. So just, instilling in them that they can make as much money as they want to make, that they can do whatever they want to do, and that they have to own their ideas is really important. One of my friends was having his first child on the way, and he said to me, how am I going to impart what it is that I love to my child? Because I want to share all those things. And I said, the key really is not to worry about sharing what you like, it's sharing what you don't like. Because, for example,
Yeah.
if you're not a skier, let's make that up, you're not a skier, and this child has a desire to ski, and you're like, it's not something that you do, or you're not comfortable with it, you're going to not do it with them, or
Yeah.
or have them do it. But you have to kind of go with it. I think that's a really important thing. Neither of my parents were scientists. My brother and I were both scientists. And, they worked with us in every way they could to enhance what it is that we wanted to do.
Wow. Oh, I love that. That's very valuable advice. Pass it over to Vlad.
Yeah, I would like to speak about your book, Goodbye Start School. And in this book, you talk about entrepreneurship, innovation, and how to be an agent of change. So my question is, what does it mean to be an agent of change?
Right. So I think and that's a great question. I think that innovation requires a change mindset, right? So if you're going to do something that is innovative and is going to make change in people's lives, you can't be afraid of it, right? Because it's about solving problems. Leadership is about solving problems. Entrepreneurship is one way of doing it. That's how I look at it. And so if you're going to be a leader and you're going to make change because you're going to solve a problem, that all's hand in glove. And so that's how I look at this. A leader makes change to solve problems.
How about the fear of change? Because I know it's a very human, it's very often among human, the fear of change. Everybody loves to sit on their one point, sit in the couch, don't do anything, don't change location, don't change job, even if they hate it. So what do you think is the main reason? Why is that?
I think that homeostasis, right, whether that's in our lives or in our body, is what we seek to obtain. I think it's a very biological, human, even, animal type of way of existing. And homeostasis, at least in theory, preserves longevity. So if something's working, don't change it. But the environment around us changes. And so if you don't adapt, right, it goes right back to all that Darwin thing. If you don't adapt to the change around us, it's going to be detrimental. The pandemic brought up enormous problems for people, right, because the change was so severe all of a sudden that they fought it in just an amazing way, to the point where they denied science, where they, denied the reality of what we were living with, and all to keep that status quo intact. But it wasn't a good thing to do that. We needed to adapt to what was happening around us. So we closed businesses. We worked from home. Kids did school from home. That was a very different world than the world that we've lived in before, or that we're reemerging into now. So I think that it's human to want to not change.
Like, how do we teach young adults, young children to be able to change, to adapt?
To put them in
Maybe they
situations,
have to force.
right? To put them in situations which allow them to, or I don't use like the word force, but need to or accommodate a change in their behavior. So if they're used to doing one thing, get them to do something else. Understand that that's not a fear-generating activity. It's just a activity. And I think getting them accustomed to travel and seeing how other people live, to understand that what you live in and how you live is not the only thing. Because that's what happens. Difference creates fear of change, or difference creates fear in general. So if you are living a certain way and then you go out and you see people live other ways, you have more understanding. You have more empathy. You understand what they're going through. And I think that's a really important part of this, because without that, anything that looks different from around you, you're going to push away.
Yeah.
And I think we see a lot of that in this country right now.
I guess I'm doing a good job with my kids. I'm moving every 1.5, 2 years to different areas in New York. I moved like 3 times. Now I'm in Arizona. So I guess I'm doing the good job.
Yes, I think it's important. Arizona is very different than New York.
Dr. Fallon, do you your first? I kind of want to walk you through, because you hold over 400 patents, which is absolutely incredible. Was the first one for when you were noticing for the autism?
Yes, that was the first one, right?
Wow.
And it was my brother who holds a ton of patents as well, in a completely different area, who encouraged me to do that, and to make me understand that if my product had a commercial value,
Right.
it was much more likely to get to children than if it was just something that I had in my head. And so that started that process. But like you asked before, if someone doesn't take ownership of their ideas, then they're not likely to do a patent for them, and all of that value is lost.
I agree 100%. I agree 100%.
And I testified in front of Congress about this,
Yeah.
about women and people of color who patent, far less than others, and also, they've relegated it to STEM. If more women were in STEM, then they would patent more, and that's not true. Other research has shown that it's just sort of an innate type of thing, that they don't tend to patent their ideas, and they need to.
Wow. And how long is usually? I mean, this is completely different, and I'm not speaking from a biopharmaceutical aspect, but just in general, the patent process. We don't hold any patents, but what does that process look like in general? Is it daunting? Is it expensive? Because that's, whenever I hear the word patent, all I think about are legal fees associated with that, or attorney fees.
They're huge. They're huge.
They're huge.
The patent office has small entity status, so you pay less for the fees. It's often the legal fees that are the biggest problem. because a patent is only as good as how it's written.
Yeah.
And so sometimes people write patents and they're not worth anything because even though they got them, they can't defend them. So you
Right.
really need to have a good patent lawyer. But I think that there'll be more and more ways in which to actually get a patent and to have the USPTO, which holds all kinds of seminars and workshops for individuals to understand the patent language and how do
Yeah.
you work with that and what does that mean? It's a whole language of its own. And
Yeah.
so,
It
and patents are not geared for everything. Not everything needs a patent.
right. Okay.
But there are certain things, certainly in my world, they need a patent.
Definitely. Definitely.
When did you got the first patent? If you started the company when you was 50 years old, so when was the first time you applied for the patent?
2023.
Before
I applied in
2023?
1999 for my first patent. That was long before I started the company.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and it was granted in 2003. So,
Mm.
it takes a little while for them to go through things. And then it often is a negotiation, right, between the patent office and the inventor. Well, I think that this is obvious, so it's not patentable, but this part isn't obvious, so it is patentable, and you need to work through that with the office. We were recently granted a patent for COVID treatment
Hmm.
that was done with FDA and the patent office, where if you if you did a patent and it went straight through without any need for negotiation, it can be done quickly. And so we were
Wow.
able to
Okay.
do that, and was granted that not too long ago.
Wow. What advice do you have for any entrepreneurs in general? There's a lot of entrepreneurs out there or people who are looking to venture into the entrepreneurship world. Any general advice, women, men,
Yeah.
in general?
One is that you need to understand that fear is not your friend.
Mm.
Awareness is your friend, but if you're fearful, then you are going to hold yourself back. Sometimes entrepreneurs want to manage a company to an exit. They say, oh, if I go this far, then this company will buy me. Well, that doesn't work because companies are bought, they're not sold. And you don't know today that that particular company that you're sure is going to buy you is still in the same business when they're ready, when you're ready.
That's
They may
yeah.
not be that. And then for the young people, I always say information does not equal knowledge, and knowledge does not equal wisdom. And they're three
Mm.
distinct things. Sometimes the young people equate information with wisdom, and
Mm.
that's just not the same thing.
Mm.
And so, if you have information and you have knowledge about something, you may need to go out and seek wisdom if you don't have it. But there's
I
wisdom
love
out there. Maybe without the information or the knowledge or the idea, but there is wisdom out there. So go seek it out.
I love that. And what are you? What is the future? And of course, you can't. You don't have a crystal ball. But what's your hope? What of the future of the treatment options look like for individuals with autism in the next 10 years? Let's say.
Yeah, that too is a great question. So, like any condition or disease, one treatment is not usually what works. And especially in
Right.
something like autism, where it's a neurodevelopmental condition on a spectrum, there
Right.
needs to be multiple treatments, drug treatments, right? And so uh, I think it's important to have that. And my hope is that once ours is approved, other people will venture into that area. But without a
Mm.
predicate kind of drug that's gone through a series of outcome measures and a path through FDA for the core symptoms, everyone's been afraid to do it. So we
Really?
haven't been afraid to do it, and
Can you clarify
hopefully,
why they're afraid to do it?
because
I'm
that's just
sorry to
how
cut.
that world works, right? People want to invest in something that's known and
Mm.
can be
Okay.
have a predictable outcome.
Right, because
right?
now it's just a ton of money into R and research, but without the development. I mean, we don't know if it's going to actually
Right.
commercialize or make
Right.
profit at the end of the day, which of
Well,
course
it's
makes
like,
sense.
even with the marijuana stocks, you think about all the marijuana things that are going on now. There's no path through FDA, at least not yet, in the same
Mm,
way that people would like there to be, and or any of the other psychedelics that people are trying to commercialize and research. So it's very hard to invest in something that people are not sure of whether it has a
mm,
path forward. They took a lot of risk with the marijuana stocks, thinking that it would be one, but I think that people want to invest with certain. Again, they don't like change, right? They want to know that this has a way of getting approved, and
right.
so once we're approved, I think it will open up the doors for a lot of other treatments that are necessary, and people will be less afraid to embark on looking for them.
Wow, it's incredible, very exciting.
Dr. Joan, my last question to you would be, we love to ask this question all our guests to learn a little bit about their story, about their personality. Who has been the strongest or most inspiring individual in your life, and what lessons have you learned from them?
So I think, if I were to have been asked that question 5 or 6 years ago, and before that, my answer always was Madeleine Albright. I think Madeleine Albright had a very difficult beginning in her life. She was an immigrant here, and she made herself a student of policy, of government, and of people. She knew how to actually work with people, and I had an opportunity a couple of years ago. I mean, she passed, what, 2 years ago, maybe, but maybe 5 years ago, to actually sit with her and have a
Wow.
whole bunch of conversations, which was wonderful. And she told a story about being at the Camp David Accords, and Begin and Sadat were kind of at each other's throats, and Begin walked out of the negotiation, and Sadat said to her, "What are we going to do now?" Like, he walked out. She said, "He'll be okay." He said, "How do you know that?" "I had a piano sent to his cottage." "A piano?" "Yeah, it calms him down. It'll be fine. He'll play the piano for a couple hours, and then
Wow.
we'll do that." So she said, so he said, what are we going to do in the meantime?" So she said, "What would you like to do?" And he said, "I want to go to your house. I understand you have a house outside, or a farm outside of DC. I want to go there." She said, "Well, my daughter's there with the kids." He said, "I don't care. I want to go there." So instead of pulling up with like 2 limousines, they pulled up with like 50 limousines, right? And her 2 young kids didn't quite know what to make of him and his
Right.
Arab robes. And she said that by the time he left, he had one child on each lap, on his lap, was reading to them, and he sent them a holiday gift every year until he died.
Wow. Wow.
So being a student of people, I think, is really an important thing in life. So for me, if that was someone that I always looked up to, because she took time for people, she understood people, and she was able to accomplish a lot because of that.
Wow. That is. Thank you so much for sharing that. That is very powerful. Dr. Fallon, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. For our listeners, please check out Dr. Fallon's work, or if you want to dive deeper into her insights on being an agent of change, I highly recommend her book, Goodbye Status Quo. You can also visit Curemark's website to explore the cutting-edge work that they're doing. Dr. Fallon, what can we expect coming out from you? Any future plans or projects aside from currently your clinical trials? Aside from that, anything exciting that you'd like to share? Or
Um,
it could be a hobby, passion project, anything.
I always talk about I have 3 loves in my life. I've had them since I was a child. They are children, medicine, and baseball, or anything with a ball. And so I've been able to involve all 3 of those things together. So I think there'll be more of all of that going forward. I'm very involved with education. I'm a board member trustee at the Dream School, which is in Harlem, and now there's another one in the Bronx, the South Bronx. And I think being able to educate children, to teach them to do the kinds of things that you are doing by putting out publications is really, really key to the future, and being able to hold fast to the fact that they are our future is important to me.
Dr. Fallon, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, thank you. Good luck to you.
This podcast is sponsored by ArgoPrep, an award-winning edtech company serving over 1 million students nationwide. We understand that as parents, you want to ensure that your child receives the best education possible. Say hello to ArgoPrep. With over 15 plus educational awards earned in just the past year, ArgoPrep's platform offers your child video lessons, quizzes, drills, printable worksheets, and more. Best of all, your ArgoPrep subscription comes included with 4 comprehensive digital workbooks that cover all 4 subjects: math, ELA, science, and social studies. Visit argoprep.com today and start your free trial.